When an old fisherman spotted what looked like a dark shape struggling in the stormy waves, he thought it was just debris, but as he pulled it aboard, he realized it was a nearly lifeless German shepherd clinging to survival. What he didn't know was that saving that dog would uncover secrets that would change his life and his past forever. The sea that morning was angry. Waves slammed into the hull of the Helena, a battered old fishing boat weathered by time and salt. Clouds hung low, thick and grey, while the wind tore at sails and skin alike. For most it was a day to stay on land, but for Bernard Wexler there was no such thing. The 73-year-old fisherman had lived by the tides since he was a boy. The Atlantic off the Maine coast had taken his father, nearly taken his son, and yet he returned each morning, line in hand, hoping for a good catch, or at least enough to justify the fuel. He didn't talk much to the townsfolk anymore. Since his wife died, Bernard had mostly kept to himself. The sea was the only place where the noise of his grief didn't echo so loudly. But that morning, as he steered the Helena through the swells with numb hands and tired eyes, something strange caught his attention. About 200 feet off the port side, a dark shape bobbed up and down between the waves. At first he thought it was driftwood, maybe a barrel or a broken crate. But then it moved, against the rhythm of the ocean. He squinted, pulling out his binoculars with a shaky hand. Not driftwood. It had fur. Bernard blinked twice. He hadn't seen a dog on the water since, well, ever. He turned the wheel sharply, cutting across the waves with years of seasoned instinct. As he got closer, the shape became clearer. A large German shepherd, soaked and barely conscious, paddling weakly. The dog's eyes locked onto Bernard's, wild with desperation and something else. Without hesitation, Bernard grabbed his hook pole and reached overboard. The boat pitched dangerously, but he managed to get the loop around the dog's neck and haul him up. The shepherd collapsed onto the deck, coughing seawater, eyes glassy and shivering violently. Bernard dropped to his knees beside him. "Easy, boy," he whispered, more to himself than to the animal. "I got you." There was something in those eyes, something familiar and human, not just fear, not just pain, recognition. He wrapped the dog in his spare fishing jacket, ignited the emergency heater, and checked for signs of broken limbs. Nothing obvious, just hypothermia, exhaustion, and a body pushed far past its limits. As the boat rocked, Bernard sat next to the dog, speaking quietly to him, words he hadn't said aloud in years. About his wife, his son, about the sea, about silence. The dog didn't respond, but he didn't need to. He was breathing. That was enough. They docked 4 hours later, with Bernard carrying the shepherd in his arms through the rain, ignoring the curious looks from dockhands and shopkeepers. He didn't care. He took the dog straight to Doc Mallory, the town's retired vet, who blinked in disbelief at the sight. "Where did you find him?" the old man asked, stethoscope already out. "Floating in the middle of a storm," Bernard said, "and he wasn't trying to die." Mallory examined the dog carefully. "No tag, no microchip, no collar." He furrowed his brow. "He's not a stray, though. Look at the coat, musculature. This is a trained working dog, maybe even ex-military." Bernard looked at the shepherd again, and for the first time, the dog met his gaze squarely. It wasn't gratitude in his eyes, it was purpose. "You're not just any dog, are you?" Bernard murmured. The vet nodded slowly. "He's been through something. Look at the old scars on his back legs, and this," he pulled back a tuft of fur near the left shoulder, revealing a faded but unmistakable tattoo, K982R. Bernard felt a chill creep through him, not from the cold, from memory. His son had served overseas. In a special unit, there had been a dog in the photos. A German shepherd, lean and intense. He hadn't thought about it in years. His son never liked to talk about that deployment. And now this dog had shown up, nearly dead, on his deck. Was it even possible? Could it be? The idea seemed absurd. But so did pulling a military dog out of the open sea in the middle of a storm. And Bernard knew one thing for certain. Fate had just walked onto his boat. But as Bernard prepared to return home with the dog, Mallory stopped him with a strange look. "You might want to keep this quiet," the vet said, "because if that dog is who I think he is, someone might already be looking for him." Bernard barely slept that night. The dog, who had started responding faintly to the name Shadow, as if it stirred something distant inside him, lay curled up on a wool blanket in front of the fireplace. His breathing had steadied, though his body still trembled with fatigue. Occasionally, he would lift his head and stare at the door, alert, as if expecting someone or something to appear at any moment. Bernard watched from the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The flickering fire cast long shadows on the walls of the cabin, and though he should have felt safe, he couldn't shake the tension in his chest. That tattoo, K982R, was burned into his mind. It wasn't just random. He had seen something like it before, years ago, in a photograph his son had mailed him from overseas. In the picture, Thomas stood tall in his uniform, one knee bent beside a German shepherd. The dog had that same lean build, that same alert gaze. Bernard had framed the photo back then, proud but worried. Thomas had served in a classified unit, details sparse, questions discouraged. His son never talked much about what he did, and after returning from deployment, he was never quite the same. Until one day he just didn't return at all. An explosion, they said. Inconclusive remains. A casket with a folded flag, but no body, no dog mentioned. Bernard had buried the grief deep. Fishing helped. Silence helped. Time helped. Until this dog appeared from the ocean like some impossible echo. Could this be the same animal? It was insane. But then again, so was pulling a trained war dog out of a storm in the middle of nowhere. He rose from the table and crouched next to Shadow. The dog didn't flinch, just opened his eyes and looked at him. "You know my boy, don't you?" Bernard asked, barely above a whisper. Shadow blinked slowly, as if the question stirred something old and buried. Then he leaned his head gently against Bernard's hand. That was answer enough. The next morning, Bernard called the vet clinic again. Dr. Mallory picked up after 2 rings. He made it through the night. "Yeah," Bernard replied, voice gruff with fatigue, "but I need answers. You said that tattoo could mean something. Who keeps those records?" Mallory hesitated. "Military, most likely, but they don't exactly publish rosters of retired dogs, especially not from special ops units, and especially not if the mission was classified. So I can't find out who he is. Not officially." A pause. "Unofficially, I might know someone who could help. An old client of mine, retired handler, lives about 4 hours north. Name's Riley Grant. If anyone can recognize a war dog by heart, it's him. Give me the address." Bernard packed Shadow into the truck that afternoon. The shepherd, still weak, rested on a folded sleeping bag in the passenger seat. Bernard had given him a small bowl of water, and the dog had sipped it slowly, his eyes never leaving Bernard's hands. The drive up the coast was long and quiet. Bernard couldn't help but feel something shifting in his chest, not just curiosity, but a gnawing need to understand why this dog had come to him. Why now? Why like this? They reached the wooded property just as the sky began to darken again. A modest cabin stood behind a fence marked "Private No Trespassing," but Bernard pulled in anyway, parking near a rusted pickup with marine decals on the rear window. Before he could even knock, the door opened. A broad-shouldered man in his late 50s stepped out, wearing jeans and a faded army sweatshirt. He stared at Shadow without blinking. Bernard introduced himself. "You Riley Grant?" "Yeah. I was told you might know something about dogs like this." Riley walked straight to the truck. Shadow, sensing something, stood shakily and met the man's gaze through the window. For a long second, neither moved. Then Riley opened the door and knelt beside the passenger seat. He didn't speak, just looked into the dog's eyes, and Shadow whimpered. Not from fear, from recognition. Riley nodded slowly, placing a hand on the shepherd's chest. "I know this dog," he said. "His name's not Shadow, it's Ghost. He was deployed with an elite recon unit in Kandahar 6 years ago. Worked with a guy named Thomas Wexler." Bernard's breath caught. "My son." Riley stood, face serious. "I didn't know your boy personally, but I remember the mission. Everyone thought the whole team was lost, Ghost included, but it looks like he made it out. Somehow." He looked down again. "This dog saw things no creature should have to. And if he found his way back to you, Mr. Wexler, it wasn't by accident. Bernard stared at Ghost, heart pounding. Then what happened to him out there? What happened to my son? Riley hesitated, then spoke the words that froze the air. That's the part I was never allowed to ask. But maybe... Ghost can show you. The silence that followed Riley's words felt heavier than the sky above them. Bernard stood motionless, one hand on the open truck door, the other clenched tight against his chest. He stared at Ghost. No, Ghost now, not Shadow, and felt his mind reel. Thomas, his boy. Ghost had been with him, and somehow, the dog had returned. "Come inside," Riley finally said, his voice low but firm. "There's more you should see." Bernard followed without a word, helping Ghost out of the truck. The dog walked slowly, but with purpose, his steps steadier now. As they entered the cabin, Ghost stopped just beyond the threshold, sniffed the air, and then walked toward a faded rug in the center of the room. He lay down right there, as if he'd done it 1,000 times before. Riley gave a knowing glance. "That was his spot," he said, gesturing toward a small photo on a nearby shelf. "That's Bravo, my last dog. Ghost used to train with him here, before he was assigned." Bernard picked up the frame. The photo showed 2 dogs sitting side by side, alert, proud. In the background, 3 soldiers smiled at the camera. One of them, he was sure of it, was Thomas. "I need to know what happened," Bernard said quietly. "Everything." Riley didn't sit. He walked to an old metal file cabinet in the corner and unlocked the bottom drawer. From it, he pulled out a stack of worn manila folders and one small black hard drive. "I kept what I could," he said. "Logs, debriefs, reports they told me to delete. I didn't trust the system. I still don't." He handed Bernard the drive. "That has the after-action logs for Operation Javelin, the one where Thomas's unit went dark. Most of it is redacted, but not the audio files." Bernard felt the cold weight of the object in his palm. "What's on them? Helmet cams, radio chatter, some footage from Ghost's own collar cam." Bernard's heart raced. He looked down at Ghost, now sleeping, and felt an overwhelming wave of emotion. This dog had seen everything, had carried something home that no one else had survived. He hesitated. "Do I want to know?" Riley looked him in the eye. "That's up to you. But I can tell you this. Ghost came back with a reason. Dogs like him don't just escape and drift in the ocean for days unless they're trying to find someone. He didn't just survive, he navigated." Bernard nodded slowly. Then, voice shaking, "Play it." Riley connected the hard drive to an old laptop. After a few moments of silence, static-filled audio crackled through the speakers. "Copy that, Echo 1. We're moving to extraction point Delta. 5 minutes out. Hold formation, K9 advancing, he's got scent." Dog panting, faint barking. "Thomas, what's he doing?" "He's alerting. Something's wrong. He's not pulling forward. He's circling." A pause. Then the sound of rapid gunfire, screams, shouting, explosion. The screen flashed, grainy body cam footage filled with smoke and chaos. Ghost barked furiously, darting through debris, weaving between bodies. Then came the image of Thomas, wounded, crouched behind cover, blood on his face. "Stay down, Ghost, stay." Another explosion. The footage cut to black. Bernard's chest tightened. He couldn't breathe. Riley pressed pause and closed the laptop. "That's where the feed ends," he said. "They assumed the whole team perished, but there were rumors. Ghost was spotted by a drone weeks later, injured, running west. Then nothing." Bernard's hands trembled. "So he survived." "Alone, all this time?" Riley nodded. "Maybe someone took him in. Maybe he hid, but somehow he remembered. And he found his way back here, to you." The 2 men sat in silence, the weight of the past thick between them. Ghost stirred on the rug, his paws twitching in his sleep. Then he let out a low growl. Riley stood. "He's dreaming, probably remembering." But it wasn't just a dream. Ghost stood up suddenly and walked to the door, then growled again. Low, warning. Bernard turned toward the window. 2 black SUVs were pulling into the driveway. Riley's face darkened. "That's not the police." Bernard's voice dropped. "Who are they?" Riley walked toward the cabinet and pulled out a locked case. People who don't want this story coming out, they probably traced the drive. Outside, 4 men in dark suits exited the vehicles. One of them wore a badge. Another carried what looked like a tranquilizer rifle. Ghost stood at the door, fur bristling, teeth bared. Riley handed Bernard the drive. "Hide it. Now." As Bernard slipped the hard drive into his jacket, footsteps crunched on the gravel. A sharp knock echoed through the cabin, then a cold voice from outside. "Mr. Wexler, we need to speak with you about the dog." Bernard's heart pounded as he approached the door, the cold voice still ringing in his ears. "Mr. Wexler, we need to speak with you about the dog." He peered through the peephole, eyes meeting those of 3 men dressed in black suits, their expressions unreadable, but eyes sharp and calculating. A 4th figure lingered just beyond sight, holding a black case that gleamed faintly under the porch light. Bernard swallowed hard, but maintained a steady voice as he opened the door. "Who are you?" "We're here on official business," the tallest man replied, flashing a silver badge. "Department of Defense. We have questions regarding your canine companion." Bernard's jaw tightened. "Shadow's name is Ghost now, and he's my dog." The men exchanged glances. "We're aware. We also know you possess classified materials related to Operation Javelin. Those materials are the property of the UAEs. Government, and must be surrendered immediately." Riley stepped forward, placing a firm hand on Bernard's shoulder. "You're not giving anything up." A tense silence fell. "Listen," the second man said, voice low but firm. "We don't want trouble, just compliance. We're authorized to ensure national security." Bernard's fists clenched. "National security doesn't give you the right to come barging onto private property, threatening my dog and me." Suddenly, the man with the case stepped forward, opening it to reveal a device designed to emit a high-frequency sound, a sonic deterrent for aggressive animals. Ghost growled, hackles raised. "Put that away!" Bernard shouted, stepping protectively in front of the dog. One of the agents reached for the device. Without hesitation, Ghost lunged, teeth bared. The agent stumbled back, caught off guard by the dog's ferocity despite his weakened state. Bernard grabbed a nearby fishing net and swung it toward the agents, shouting, "Get off my property!" Riley, noticing the growing tension, shouted, "Bernard, we don't want a fight. Let's talk this through." The men regrouped, raising their hands in a show of temporary truce. "We're authorized to investigate any unauthorized release of classified data," the lead agent said. "We believe the material in your possession could compromise ongoing operations and put lives at risk." Emily's voice rang out from the porch behind them. "Lives were already lost," she said, stepping into the light, "and the truth deserves to be told." The agents hesitated, caught between their orders and the conviction in Emily's tone. Suddenly, headlights appeared down the driveway. A convoy of 4 vehicles rolled up, armed men stepping out with tactical precision. Bernard and Riley exchanged looks. "The situation had escalated beyond control," Emily whispered. "They're not here to negotiate." Ghost growled low and moved to stand beside Emily. The men in black suits turned toward the newcomers. An officer stepped forward, nodding curtly to the agents. "This operation is under new jurisdiction," he announced. "Stand down." A standoff ensued, the tension thick as the night air. Emily gripped Ghost's leash tightly. "This is only the beginning," she said quietly. Inside the cabin, as the tension slowly dissipated, Riley locked the door and pulled out a small satellite phone. "We need to get this footage out," he said, voice firm. Bernard nodded, his resolve hardening. "We'll fight to make sure Ghost's story and Thomas's aren't buried again." Ghost lay at their feet, eyes alert. The battle for the truth was far from over. Just as Riley dialed the number to upload the files, the power flickered and went out, plunging the cabin into darkness. A faint scratching came from the back window. Bernard froze. Someone's outside. The cabin plunged into darkness, the single oil lamp's flame guttering out as power, if there ever truly was any, stalled. Rain pattered against the roof and windows, punctuating the silence. Bernard held his breath, glancing at the blacked-out room. The figures of Riley, Emily, Sully, and the hidden satellite phone barely visible by moonlight. Ghost stood at attention near the door, ears pricked. tail stiff, a sentinel in canine form. The sound at the back window intensified, a scraping, deliberate, as if something or someone were probing the glass. Riley whispered, "They're trying to get in." Emily grabbed a flashlight off the table and clicked it on. The beam sliced across the room, landing on the back door's window pane. Rain streaked down in rivulets, but beyond it, a dark silhouette slipped away into the night. Sully crossed to the front door and double-checked the locks. "They're probing every entrance. Must be multiple teams." Bernard pressed himself against the wall. "We can't stay here. They'll breach soon." Emily knelt beside Ghost, running her hand along his flank. "He's exhausted. We need another plan." Riley examined the sat phone. "Network's still up, but we need satellite uplink. If we stay here, they'll jam the signal." Sully nodded. "There's a ranger station 5 miles north, high ground, clear sky. We could use its repeater." Bernard glanced out the window at the storm. "In this weather." Emily took a breath. "We don't have a choice." They gathered supplies, rations, radios, flashlights, and the laptop containing the decrypted footage. Ghost seemed to sense urgency. He didn't protest when Emily helped him to his paws. Riley shouldered a rifle. "I'll lead. You—" He pointed at Sully. "Cover our rear. Emily, Bernard, stick together. I'll get you there." Outside, the wind howled. Rain lashed their faces as they moved in single file. Ghost close beside Emily. The muddy track turned to a steep incline. Lightning flashed, revealing the skeleton of the old ranger station atop the rise. Riley knocked on the heavy metal door. No answer. Sully radioed their makeshift network. "Base, this is Echo Team. Anyone here?" Static answered, then a raspy voice. "This is Ranger Brooks. I'm here. Doors unlocked." They entered a small control room lined with outdated yet functional communications gear. Brooks, a veteran forest ranger and old friend of Sully's, stepped forward. "I heard you might need a secure link." She pointed to a satellite dish outside, half intact. "It can reach the uplink satellite if untouched. The power's on emergency generator. Let's go." Minutes later, a skeleton crew assembled around the terminal. Riley secured the perimeter, peering into the storm-shrouded woods. Sully and Brooks powered up the uplink. Emily plugged in the laptop. Ghost lay at Emily's feet, his flank heaving. "Just a few minutes," Emily whispered. "Hang in there." Lightning illuminated the control room through the window, followed by the distant sound of engines. Ghost raised his head, ears flicking. Riley pressed a finger to his lips, signaling urgency. Sully spoke into the mic. "This is Alpha, initiating upload in T-10 seconds." Emily took a final breath, then clicked send. A progress bar crawled upward, 10%, 30%, 50%. Outside, the engines grew louder. Headlights bobbed through the trees. Just as the upload hit 75%, the fury of the storm was joined by the thrum of armored vehicles bursting through underbrush. Floodlights pierced the windows. Sully cursed. Brooks slammed the generator off, plunging them into red emergency lighting. The upload stalled. Emily stared at the screen. "No!" Riley yelled. "We need power back." Sully dashed to the generator controls, flicking switches in the dim light. Brooks and Riley shielded the windows, training weapons outward. Ghost rose, hackles up, teeth bared. The upload resumed, 90%, 95%. The door rattled under powerful blows. Riley shouted, "Keep it going!" Emily's finger hovered. "Just a bit longer." Outside, the armored vehicles ground to a halt. Boots hit the metal grating of the door. Muffled shouts, "Open up! This is federal order!" Ghost let out a single, deep bark that echoed off the walls. Emily's voice was steady. "Finish it." At that moment, the progress bar flicked to 100%. A confirmation ping sounded. Brooks hit enter. "Sent," Emily whispered. She exhaled. Sirens wailed in the distance. The storm's roar receded slightly, as if nature itself paused. On the sat phone, a voice broke through the static. "We have it. Global channels live." Riley lowered his weapon. "They can't block all of them." Sully peeked through the window. The vehicles stood idle, heads turning toward the forest road where lights approached. Emily scooped Ghost into her arms. They'll come for us next, Bernard nodded. Then we keep moving. Pulling their coats tight, the group slipped out the back door into the night, Ghost cradled safely against Emily's chest as the first bulletins began broadcasting around the world. Classified war dog footage leaked, Pentagon under scrutiny. The group pressed into the forest, rain soaking their clothes and skin as thunder rolled overhead. Bernard led the way with Riley close behind, keeping the laptop and sat phone dry inside his jacket. Emily cradled Ghost, who shivered but stayed alert, ears constantly swiveling for signs of pursuit. Sully brought up the rear, her flashlight cutting through the swirling mist. Behind them, the ranger station was quickly swallowed by darkness and trees. Only the distant glow of floodlights and the shouts of federal agents realizing their quarry had slipped away remained as a warning. They would not give up easily. They hiked for nearly an hour, following old game trails up into higher ground, the forest closing in on all sides. At last, they paused beneath the low branches of a massive pine, breathless and tense. "We can't keep running forever," Bernard whispered, shivering as he looked at the others. "We need a plan," Riley nodded. "We bought ourselves some time. The upload is out. But if they catch us, they'll claim it's fake, doctored, unless we have witnesses." Emily glanced at Ghost, gently stroking his fur. "We need proof that ties Ghost to Thomas and that the dog's story is real. Not just files, but people. Someone from Thomas's unit. Someone who saw what happened that day." Sully checked the sat phone. "Brooks's signal is holding. I can try to reach a contact, a journalist at a major network. If we can get her here, she'll record everything. She's got the trust of the public." Bernard hesitated. "But if we call her, we risk leading everyone else to us too." Riley looked at Ghost, then at Bernard. "You said your son wrote letters. Do you have them?" Bernard nodded, pulling a battered envelope from his inside pocket. "They're all I have left." Riley took the letters, scanning the handwriting. "If there's anything in here that mentions Ghost by name, that's gold." Emily rummaged in her bag and handed Riley a dog tag, weathered, but engraved with both Thomas's and Ghost's information. Riley smiled grimly. "With the letters, the tag, and the footage, we have a case. Now we just need a witness." Sully listened to static on the sat phone, then caught a voice, faint but familiar. "This is O'Hara." "Sully, you out there?" Sully grinned. "O'Hara's a retired sergeant from Thomas's team. If he's willing to talk, that's what we need." The group listened as Sully explained the situation. O'Hara's response was clear. "I saw what happened. Ghost saved us all. I'll meet you, but not in town. Not anywhere they can trace. There's an old mill 3 miles east. No cell signal, no surveillance. Be there at first light." Riley looked at Bernard. "That's our next move." As the rain slackened, they made a makeshift camp beneath a thicket, huddled for warmth. Emily fed Ghost some jerky, and for the first time since the storm, the dog's tail wagged softly. Bernard sat close, tears in his eyes as he stroked Ghost's head. "You found your way home, boy. You brought the truth with you." For a while, the only sounds were Ghost's quiet breathing and the wind in the trees. But as dawn crept over the horizon, the world began to wake, and with it, new dangers. In the distance, the low rumble of engines echoed again. Riley and Sully peered into the mist. "Time to move," Sully whispered. They broke camp, following the narrow trail toward the abandoned mill, hearts pounding with both hope and fear. The old mill loomed ahead, its stone walls streaked with moss and age. Bernard kept Ghost close as they entered the cavernous main room, sunlight filtering through broken rafters. O'Hara waited inside, grizzled, lean, and wearing a battered camo jacket. He looked at Ghost and nodded, emotion flickering in his eyes. "I never thought I'd see you again, old friend," he said, kneeling so Ghost could sniff his hand. Ghost wagged, ears up and alert. O'Hara looked at Bernard. "Thomas was a hero, and so was this dog. The brass tried to erase what happened, but I saw it all." He handed Bernard a worn notebook. "My own log from that mission. Names, dates, what Ghost did, what your son did. I kept it hidden all these years, in case I ever had to tell the truth." Emily's eyes filled with tears as she opened the book, scanning the entries. Riley connected the sat phone to a small recorder, O'Hara's testimony echoing quietly through the dusty air. "Let them come," O'Hara said, eyes blazing. "This time we're ready." But as O'Hara began his story, the sharp crack of a rifle shot split the silence. A bullet shattered the stone above Bernard's head. "They've found us!" Sully shouted, pulling everyone to cover as armed men burst through the mill's doors. Gunfire echoed off the stone walls as chaos exploded inside the old mill. Riley grabbed Bernard and shoved him behind a rusted grain hopper, Emily shielding Ghost as Sully and O'Hara scrambled for cover. Dust and chips of old brick filled the air as bullets tore through decayed timber and sheet metal. Sully shouted over the roar, "Don't return fire unless you have to. We need witnesses alive." Riley peeked around the corner. At least 6 armed men in tactical vests fanned out through the main entrance, moving with silent, practiced precision. One called out, voice metallic through a radio mask, "Surrender the dog and the footage. No one else has to get hurt." Bernard's heart thundered. He glanced down at Ghost, who crouched close to his side, ears flat, but eyes clear, focused, unafraid. Emily clutched the sat phone, knuckles white. O'Hara gritted his teeth. "They'll kill us for what we know." Sully's eyes darted to the back wall. A half-collapsed doorway gaped at the far end of the mill, partially hidden by stacked pallets. She whispered, "There's an old flood tunnel behind the grain bins. Might get us clear." Riley nodded. "O'Hara, you and Bernard move first. Emily, follow with Ghost. I'll cover you." Gunshots rattled again as the attackers pressed closer, shouting warnings. O'Hara led the way, clutching his battered notebook. Bernard guided Ghost, trying to keep the dog low to the ground, the dog tag and letters pressed to his chest. Emily hesitated, fear clawing at her gut. "Ghost is slowing down." Bernard paused, dropping to his knees beside the shepherd. Ghost panted, legs shaking, but nudged Bernard's palm with his nose as if to say, "Keep going." "Come on, boy," Bernard whispered. "Just a little more." Riley and Sully laid down covering fire, warning shots designed to slow pursuit but not escalate the bloodshed. O'Hara, Bernard, Emily, and Ghost slipped through the narrow doorway into the shadows beyond. The flood tunnel was tight, damp, and reeking of old mold. Their flashlights cast trembling beams along the walls. Behind them, gunfire faded. The mill's attackers, wary of ambush, were not eager to charge blindly into darkness. They crawled for what felt like forever, knees and elbows scraping mud and stone. O'Hara grunted, "Almost there?" Finally, they emerged in a tangle of briars and wet grass, 100 yards from the mill's rear. Sully and Riley joined them moments later, faces streaked with sweat and dirt. Sully checked her phone. "Signal's back. They must be jamming only around the mill." Riley exhaled. "We're alive, but for how long?" "They'll sweep the woods." O'Hara, breathless, handed his notebook to Emily. "Take it. My testimony. Everything that happened. If they get me, run." Emily gripped the notebook tightly, the weight of it sinking in. "I won't let them erase you. Or Thomas or Ghost." Bernard wrapped Ghost in his arms, the dog pressing close. "He can't keep going much farther. We need help." Sully pointed east. "There's a back road, just beyond the tree line. If we can reach it, Brooks can pick us up. She's still monitoring emergency services. She'll see us through." They moved as quickly as they dared, sticking to cover and moving single file. The woods seemed to close in tighter, every shadow threatening. Behind them, sirens began to wail. Either for the firefight or for some other crisis, it was impossible to tell. After what felt like an hour, they reached the gravel road. Brooks's battered pickup sat waiting, headlights off, engine running. She leaned out the window, rifle in hand. "Hurry up," she hissed. "There's a roadblock forming at the main highway. I can get you as far as the state line." Everyone piled into the truck bed, Ghost curled between Emily and Bernard. As Brooks gunned the engine and sped down the deserted road, Emily looked up at the sunrise peeking through broken clouds. "Will it be enough?" she asked, voice raw. "The notebook, the footage, the testimony, will it be enough to save Ghost and clear Thomas's name?" Sully met her gaze in the mirror. "We won't stop until it is." Riley squeezed Bernard's shoulder. "You're not alone in this anymore. Ghost raised his head, eyes bright, despite exhaustion, and as the pickup disappeared into the dawn, Bernard knew that whatever came next, they had done what was right, even as more enemies closed in from every side. But as they neared the state line, blue lights flashed in the distance, a wall of cruisers and SUVs blocking the only way forward. Brooks cursed under her breath. "Looks like we're not the only ones who planned for this." Brooks slowed the pickup, killing the headlights. The dawn was just bright enough to illuminate the flashing blue and red lights ahead. State troopers, federal SUVs, and a pair of unmarked vans blocking every lane of the old highway. There would be no sneaking by. Bernard looked at Ghost, the dog's flanks heaving but his gaze unbroken. Emily gripped the battered notebook so tightly, her knuckles whitened. Sully surveyed the line of vehicles and scanned the woods on either side of the road. "They'll have men in the trees," she muttered. "No use running for it." Brooks put the truck in reverse, wheels crunching on gravel, but within seconds, a siren wailed behind them. Another cruiser had flanked the rear, boxing them in. Riley reached for his radio, voice tense. "We can't fight our way out, not with Ghost and O'Hara in this shape." O'Hara, pale and sweating from the tunnel escape, managed a grim smile. "I'll walk out and talk. My badge still means something, might buy us time." Sully shook her head. "If you step out, they'll detain you. This is coordinated. Someone wants to silence us before we get any further." Brooks exhaled, scanning her phone for signal. "Wait, someone's calling in, on the secure line." She handed Sully a battered earpiece. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, clipped, military. "Echo Team, this is Sierra Base. You are not alone. Hold position. Do not surrender. Reinforcements are en route." Sully's eyes widened. "Who is this?" "A friend of Thomas Wexler. Repeat, do not surrender the dog. Confirm identity with phrase, Helena's watch." Bernard's breath caught. The Helena was his boat, a secret only his son and he would use. He nodded. "They're legit." Riley smiled for the first time in hours. "Maybe our luck's changing." Moments later, the line of police vehicles parted. A black SUV with diplomatic plates rolled between the barricades and parked in front of Brooks's truck. Two people stepped out, a woman in civilian clothes with a State Department badge and a uniformed colonel with Army Special Investigations. The colonel approached, calm and direct. "Mr. Wexler, Sergeant O'Hara, I'm Colonel McNeil. You have materials the Department of Defense is now officially requesting for review and protection, not destruction. We know about Ghost and about Thomas." The State Department agent stepped forward, softening her tone. "This story has reached Capitol Hill. The footage is already circulating on international press circuits. You're not criminals, you're witnesses. If you come with us, we'll guarantee safe passage for everyone, including the dog." Brooks raised an eyebrow. "Why the sudden change of heart?" Colonel McNeil glanced at the rows of federal agents still waiting at the barricades. "Not everyone wants to do the right thing, but enough of us do. And after what's hit the news this morning, no one wants another scandal. You'll be taken to a safe house, and O'Hara's testimony will be delivered directly to Congress." Emily clung to Ghost, who, sensing the tension ease, rested his head on her lap. Bernard looked at his companions. "If this is our chance, we take it." Sully nodded, her hand steady on her sidearm but ready to trust, for now. "Let's move." They transferred into the black SUV. Ghost gently lifted onto the back seat with Emily. O'Hara and Bernard climbed in, clutching the notebook and sat phone. Brooks, Riley and Sully followed in a second vehicle, flanked by two Army MPs. The convoy sped down a closed service road, away from the barricades, while news alerts buzzed on every phone. Breaking. Leaked war dog footage sparks Pentagon probe. Whistleblowers, canine hero, and evidence en route to DC. Inside the SUV, the state agent turned to Emily. "You saved this dog, and in doing so, you saved the truth. No matter what happens in those hearings, millions have already seen what Ghost and Thomas did. That's something no one can erase." Bernard reached over to stroke Ghost's fur, tears streaming freely now. "You found your way home, old boy. And you brought all of us with you." As they sped toward Washington, the first hints of sunlight painted the sky gold. The worst of the chase was over, but a new fight, this time in the public eye, was just beginning. As the convoy reached the outskirts of D.C., the colonel's phone buzzed. He read the message, face grave. "Congress wants you on the record, now. The hearing starts in 1 hour. Get ready." This is the moment everything changes. The convoy threaded through morning traffic, blue lights clearing the path as Washington, D.C.'s skyline emerged through misty sunlight. Bernard stared out the window, feeling both numb and electrified. So many years lost to silence and doubt, now barreling toward a reckoning he never imagined. Emily stroked Ghost's head, whispering comfort, feeling the shepherd's trembling body grow calm under her hand. The State Department agent handed Emily a folder. "These are your rights as a witness. Congress will want to know everything about Ghost, about Thomas, about what you've uncovered, the notebook, the letters, the dog tag, the footage. Present them all. Don't let anyone steer you off the truth." Riley sat beside Bernard, running through the chain of evidence one last time. "Just tell the story straight. They'll try to discredit you, claim you faked the footage, manipulated the dog tags, made up O'Hara's log. Stay calm. Let the facts speak." O'Hara, pale but determined, gripped his cane and the battered notebook. "They buried us once. Not again." Ghost shifted restlessly on the seat as the SUV rolled past the Capitol dome. A Marine in dress uniform saluted the convoy as they turned onto Constitution Avenue. Bernard swallowed the lump in his throat. Thomas should have seen this. His boy. Finally coming home, even if only in spirit. The group was led through a side entrance, away from press throngs gathered at the front steps. Inside, corridors echoed with the murmur of history and tension. Staffers hustled them through security, then into a holding room where Colonel McNeil briefed them one last time. "The hearing will be live. Your words will go straight to the public. There will be skeptics, but the evidence is already out. Your goal is to make the story human, make them see Ghost not as a pawn, but as a partner. Understood?" Emily nodded, clutching Ghost's collar and Bernard's hand. Sully squeezed her shoulder. "We're with you, every step." A clerk appeared at the door. "They're ready." In the vast, high-ceilinged hearing room, rows of congressmen, women, and senior officials awaited. Reporters lined the back. TV cameras blinked red. In the center, a long wooden table, name placards, microphones, pitchers of water, stacks of documents. On the screens behind the committee, images of Ghost, wet, battered, but alive on the fishing boat, Ghost in military gear, running alongside Thomas, grainy footage from helmet cams, looped silently. Bernard, Emily, O'Hara, and Sully took their seats. Riley, Brooks, and the colonel stood behind, flanking Ghost. The shepherd lay by Emily's feet, eyes bright, watching everything. The chairman's gavel echoed. "This hearing of the House Committee on Veterans and Military Affairs will come to order. We will hear testimony regarding allegations of suppressed service records, the fate of Specialist Thomas Wexler, and the military working dog known as Ghost." Bernard's voice wavered as he recounted finding Ghost at sea, recognizing the tattoo, tracing the trail back to Riley, O'Hara, and finally the hidden logs. Emily told of the night Ghost nearly died, the clues he carried, and the long chain of evidence that led them here. O'Hara's voice was hoarse, but steady. He described the mission. Ghost saved lives. He refused to leave Thomas. When the ambush came, it was clear. Someone higher up wanted loose ends. Ghost wouldn't run. He stayed, even as bullets fell. "I owe him my life." Skeptical committee members pressed. "How do we know this dog isn't just another shepherd?" Riley produced the dog tag, the photos, the letters, each matching Ghost's scars, the collar, and the documented timeline. The chairman leaned forward. "And the footage." Brooks cued the files. On screens throughout the chamber, the room watched as Ghost darted through gunfire, shielded Thomas, and later, weeks later, wandered burned villages, wounded but searching, always heading east. A hush fell as O'Hara read from his notebook, describing Thomas's last words, whispered to Ghost, "Go home." Bernard's tears fell freely now, and even some in the audience wiped their eyes. Ghost, sensing the emotion, sat up, alert, proud. He turned, looked at the chairman, and wagged his tail as if to say, "I did my duty." As the questioning wound down, the committee members retreated to deliberate. Press and public were ushered out, but not before dozens of reporters snapped photos of Ghost and Emily side by side. Bernard wrapped his arms around Ghost, feeling hope for the first time in years. "Whatever they decide, you made it, boy. You made it all the way home." Just as they began to relax, Colonel McNeil returned, face tense. "There's been a leak. Certain factions are trying to spin this as treason, claiming the footage endangered national security. You're going to need all your strength for what's coming next. The real verdict is about to drop." The hearing room's tension was electric as the committee reconvened, the air thick with anticipation and anxiety. Emily clutched Ghost's collar while Bernard gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. O'Hara sat ramrod straight, jaw clenched in silent defiance. TV cameras panned slowly across the faces, some hopeful, some hostile, all waiting. The chairman rapped his gavel twice. "Order. This committee has reviewed the evidence and heard the testimony. Before we render a decision, the ranking minority member wishes to address the witnesses." A grey-haired congressman leaned forward, gaze direct. "Miss Reynolds, Mr. Wexler, Sergeant O'Hara, your story has shaken the nation, but you must understand the weight of what you've brought to light. Do you regret making the evidence public?" Emily's voice trembled but did not falter. "No, sir. I regret nothing. The truth costs, but silence costs more. My brother deserved to be remembered. Ghost deserved to be seen." Bernard nodded, voice rough. "Thomas was more than a headline. He was a son, and Ghost, he's a soldier too." The congressman paused, then nodded solemnly. "Thank you for your honesty." The chairman resumed, reading from a prepared statement. "This committee finds the following. The service of Specialist Thomas Wexler was wrongfully suppressed. The actions of the canine known as Ghost meet and exceed the standard for official recognition as a combat veteran. Effective immediately, both will receive full military honors. Furthermore, we recommend the Department of Defense review all suppressed service animal records for similar injustices." The words hung in the air, met with a moment of stunned silence. Then the room erupted. Some committee members applauded. Journalists jostled for photos. Brooks hugged Riley. Sully let out a long sigh of relief. Emily's tears spilled freely. She bent to hug Ghost, who licked her cheek and whined softly, tail thumping. "We did it, boy. We really did it." Bernard let himself cry for the first time in years, letting decades of grief and pride wash over him. O'Hara offered his battered notebook to the committee clerk, voice breaking. "Let the record show. Thomas Wexler and Ghost saved lives. And now the world will remember." But as the celebrations swelled, a group of stone-faced officials stood and exited the room, cell phones pressed to their ears. Colonel McNeil intercepted one as he passed, words low and urgent. "They're not all pleased," the colonel murmured to Sully. "Some higher-ups see this as a threat. There's talk of charges, reckless disclosure, undermining operations. You're not out of the woods yet." Emily's stomach tightened, but Riley gripped her shoulder. "You told the truth. The world is watching now." Reporters gathered outside the chamber, demanding comment. Emily, still clutching Ghost, stepped into the glare of cameras. "What's next?" a journalist shouted. Emily drew a shaky breath. "What's next is that no more heroes, human or canine, get left behind. Not on my watch, not ever again." The broadcast spread across the nation. Justice for Ghost trended in dozens of countries. Military working dog programs saw a surge in funding. Families with lost or retired canines reached out, sharing their own stories of courage and heartbreak. That night, as the Wexlers and their friends settled into a safe house under government protection, Bernard sat on the porch, with Ghost beside him. Emily joined him, a mug of tea warming her hands. "Did you ever think it would end like this?" she asked softly. Bernard shook his head, voice hushed. "No, but I think it's only the beginning. There are more stories out there, more ghosts." Ghost rested his head on Bernard's knee, gaze gentle, body finally relaxed. For the first time since the storm at sea, he slept soundly. But as Bernard watched the stars, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "There are more like him. I have proof. Meet me at dawn. Come alone and bring Ghost." Bernard read it twice, heart racing. Who else had a story to tell, and what dangers still waited in the shadows? Bernard barely slept that night. He replayed the message over and over. "There are more like him. I have proof. Meet me at dawn. Come alone and bring Ghost." The weight of those words pressed on his chest as the hours crept by. Emily sensed his anxiety, but he told her nothing, not wanting to draw her deeper into danger. At 5:30, Bernard quietly dressed, slipped on his coat, and whistled softly to Ghost. The shepherd rose, instantly alert, as if he'd known this call would come. Together, they slipped from the safe house, leaving Emily a brief note: "Trust me. Back soon." Bernard drove through the sleeping city as the sky grew pale. The address was an empty park on the Potomac's edge, mist curling over the river. Only a single figure waited, a young woman in a grey windbreaker, hair pulled back, scanning the horizon nervously. At her feet, a brown Belgian Malinois sat, posture straight, scars peeking through its short fur. Bernard stepped out, keeping Ghost close. "You sent the message?" She nodded. "My name's Lieutenant Reyes. I worked in the same unit as your son. Years later, after the scandal. They tried to shut everything down, but I kept files. This," she gestured to the Malinois, "is Valor. He was Ghost's partner before your boy's team went dark. After that, they pulled all the dogs, scattered us, erased the logs, but I never stopped digging." She handed Bernard a battered flash drive. "On here, deployment reports, internal memos, unreleased footage. Ghost wasn't the only one abandoned. There are at least a dozen more, dogs and handlers. Some are still out there, some never made it home." Ghost sniffed Valor, a soft whine escaping him, recognition, loss, kinship. Valor licked his muzzle in return. Reyes's voice dropped. "The truth we started yesterday. It's only a beginning, but powerful people still want it buried. They'll come after anyone who pushes further. I need you to take this to the press, not Congress, everyone." Bernard hesitated. "Why me?" "Because you have nothing left to lose, and you already proved you won't give up. And because Ghost chose you. That matters." Sirens wailed distantly. Reyes glanced over her shoulder. "I can't stay. If I'm caught, I'll deny everything, but Valor will go with you." She pressed a slip of paper into his hand, a list of handlers, dogs, and contacts willing to testify. "They'll listen to you, Bernard, and to Ghost. Tell their stories. All of them." With a final nod, Reyes disappeared into the mist, leaving Bernard with Ghost and Valor by his side. As the sun broke through the clouds, Bernard returned to the safe house, heart pounding with adrenaline and hope. Emily was awake, worry etched on her face. She read his note, then rushed out to meet him, relief warring with anger. "You could have been killed," she scolded. Bernard held up the flash drive and the list. "We're not finished, Em. There are others. Dogs like Ghost, handlers like Thomas. We have their names. We have proof." Riley, Sully, and O'Hara gathered around as Bernard explained. Riley examined the flash drive, awe dawning on his face. "This is the smoking gun, Bernard. If we go public with this, they'll have to overhaul the whole program. There'll be pushback, threats, but it'll save lives and memories." O'Hara, tears in his eyes, shook Bernard's hand. "You did what none of us dared. You brought the lost home." Emily hugged Bernard fiercely, then knelt to introduce Valor to Ghost. The two dogs circled, tails wagging, a silent reunion of survivors. As the group strategized, Brooks's phone lit up. "It's the BBC, then Reuters, then AP. They want interviews. Now. You ready?" Bernard nodded. "We start with the dogs. Their faces, their stories. The world will decide if silence or truth wins." That afternoon, the first wave of interviews aired. Images of Ghost and Valor appeared on screens from Maine to Moscow. Families of other lost handlers reached out. Lawmakers called for emergency hearings. Military brass announced a new independent review. Emily stood with Bernard and the dogs on the Capitol steps, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. "What will you do next?" someone called out. Bernard looked at Ghost and Valor, then at Emily, Riley, and all the friends who'd fought with him. "We'll keep telling the truth," he said quietly, "until there are no more ghosts left in the dark." But as the crowd dispersed and the press moved on, Bernard's phone buzzed with a new message. "No number, no signature. This isn't over. There are forces you haven't met yet. Watch your back and keep the dogs close." Bernard pocketed the phone, eyes steely. For Ghost, for Valor, and for every forgotten hero, the fight was far from done. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the marble spires of the Capitol, Bernard and Emily watched the city lights flicker on from the safe house window. Inside, Ghost and Valor sprawled together on a patchwork blanket, finally able to rest side by side. The house was tense with anticipation. Riley double-checked the locks, Brooks monitored news feeds, and Sully kept her sidearm within reach. The world was paying attention. That much was clear. News anchors debated policy reforms, and social media overflowed with support for the war dogs and their handlers. Yet for every message of hope, there was another. Dark, anonymous, threatening. Bernard received 3 calls that day alone, warning him to let sleeping dogs lie. O'Hara, voice hoarse, read the names on the slip of paper aloud. Martinez and Kilo, Ukraine. Peterson, still missing. Sergeant Lin, handler for Jet, last seen in Syria. Each name weighed heavier, each story lost to bureaucracy and indifference. Late at night, Emily sat by the fire, reading Thomas's letters aloud, some trembling with fear, some full of dark jokes and small comforts from the field. Ghost nuzzled her hand, his tail thumping at the sound of his late handler's name. Suddenly, Brooks' phone chimed. "Emergency alert. Congressional hearings suspended. Allegations of classified document tampering. Media access restricted pending investigation." Sully scowled. "They're trying to bury the story again. The pressure's coming from high up." Riley turned to Bernard. "They can't stop the public now, not after what they've seen. But we can't let the officials walk this back." Emily wiped a tear. "Then we go bigger. No more back rooms, no more filters. We take it directly to the people. Every channel, every feed," Brooks grinned. "The BBC is offering a live special, global primetime. I can patch in the testimonies, the footage, the letters, live, unedited." Bernard nodded, a new resolve in his voice. "Do it, tonight." The group sprang into action. Brooks and Sully handled security. Riley lined up the files and raw video. Emily gathered the letters and O'Hara's testimony. Bernard sat in the center, Ghost and Valor at his side, ready for whatever storm might follow. As the broadcast went live, millions tuned in around the world. Bernard spoke, voice trembling but strong. "My son was more than a soldier. He was a person who loved, who laughed, who believed his partner, his dog, deserved to come home too. For every family who's waited by the phone, for every handler and dog left in the shadows, you are not forgotten anymore." Emily read from Thomas's last letter. "If Ghost finds his way back, take care of him. He'll bring you home too." Brooks aired the footage, Ghost's rescue at sea, Valor's reunion, and scenes of handlers weeping over empty kennels. O'Hara named every dog, every handler, every sacrifice. And as the feed neared its end, messages flooded in, veterans reaching out to find lost dogs, volunteers offering to foster, lawmakers pledging new oversight. Bernard could barely read them through his tears, but as the world cheered, the safe house grew tense. Headlights flashed outside, unmarked sedans and SUVs crawling past, agents inside scanning the house with night vision. Sully whispered, "Time to move again. You made your stand, Bernard. Now let's get everyone out." Riley and Brooks hustled everyone through the back, a van waiting in the alley. Ghost and Valor leapt inside without hesitation. As they sped into the night, Bernard watched the city shrink in the rearview mirror. Emily squeezed his hand. "You did it, Dad. You changed everything." But Bernard shook his head. "We started something, Em. It's up to everyone else to finish it." She smiled through tears. "We will." And as Ghost and Valor curled up, finally at peace, Bernard knew that even if powerful enemies still lurked, their story had broken through. From now on, no war dog would ever be just a ghost. As they disappeared into the dark, Brooks checked her phone. One last alert. Breaking. Several new whistleblowers come forward. Congressional committee reopens. International tribunal to review war animal records worldwide. Bernard exhaled, finally hopeful. The world was listening, but the fight for justice was only beginning. Within 48 hours of the live broadcast, the world had changed. News outlets across continents ran headlines about Ghost, Valor, Thomas, and the secret network of war dogs and forgotten handlers. Images of Ghost's rescue at sea and his reunion with Bernard went viral. Clips of Emily reading Thomas's letter played on every channel, his last wish echoing across languages, borders, and cultures. Veterans organizations organized marches. Memorials sprang up in cities from London to Seoul. Candlelit vigils gathered at military bases, where handlers stood side by side with their canine partners, holding photos of those lost in silence. Children sent drawings, strangers mailed thank-you notes, and shelters were flooded with applications from families wanting to give retired canines a home. But while the world mourned and celebrated, the halls of power were in uproar. At a reopened congressional hearing, Bernard, Emily, Sully, Brooks, Riley, and O'Hara appeared in person. This time, no secret doors, only open cameras and a gallery packed with press and veterans. Ghost and Valor sat between them, calm and alert, ambassadors of a story too real to be denied. The committee chairman spoke gravely. In light of new evidence, international attention and overwhelming public outcry, this government will enact sweeping reform. All war dogs, past and present, will be recognized as official veterans. Handlers and families will receive retroactive honors and compensation. An independent review will begin to locate, recover, and honor every animal and human left behind. Standing ovation thundered through the chamber. Bernard's tears fell as he hugged Ghost and Valor, Emily holding his hand. Even the most hardened officials wiped their eyes. O'Hara's voice shook as he whispered, "We did it, boys. We finally did it." But with the victory came reckoning. Several high-ranking officers and contractors were called to testify. Investigations revealed patterns of cover-up, neglect, and greed. Whistleblowers, emboldened by the public's support, stepped forward from across the military, risking everything to tell the truth. International organizations picked up the call. The United Nations convened a special session on the rights and recognition of animal veterans worldwide. Other countries, Britain, Canada, Israel, Germany, pledged their own reforms. Amidst the avalanche of justice, Ghost and Valor became living symbols. Their faces graced magazine covers, their names invoked in new laws, yet they remained at heart two dogs seeking peace. When not on camera or at ceremonies, Bernard and Emily shielded them from the spotlight, taking them on long walks through quiet parks, letting them run and rest at last. But the fight was not without cost. Threats still arrived, anonymous, urgent, sometimes hateful. Old enemies sought to discredit the evidence, to muddy the record, to frighten Bernard and his allies back into silence. One night, as Bernard closed the gate behind the dogs, a letter was taped to his door. "You opened a wound that will never heal. Some truths should stay buried." He brought it inside, hands trembling, and showed it to Emily. She looked at him with fierce love and resolve. "That's why we keep telling the story, Dad. Until the world is too bright for ghosts." And so they did. Every new hearing, every new family reunited with a lost canine, every handler who found comfort in knowing they weren't forgotten. One day, Bernard stood on stage at Arlington National Cemetery as Ghost and Valor. Both in custom vests, received the nation's highest animal service medal. He spoke for all of them, living, lost, and waiting. My son once wrote, "A dog's love doesn't end with orders. It only ends when they're home." For years we forgot what home meant. Today we remember, and we promise never to forget again. As the crowd applauded, Ghost lifted his head, tail wagging, eyes full of something ancient and grateful. Valor licked Bernard's hand, as if passing on the thanks of every animal who ever served in silence. And in that moment, Beneath a flag that rippled in the clean spring wind, Bernard felt a peace he'd never known, a certainty that, whatever battles remained, the tide had turned. As the ceremony ended and the crowd dispersed, Emily glanced at Bernard, hope shining in her eyes. But Brooks approached quietly, phone in hand. Interpol just reached out. There are dogs missing in conflict zones around the world. They want our help. Bernard looked at Ghost and Valor, then at Emily, a smile growing. Our fight's not over, Em. It's only just begun. Months passed. The world settled into a new rhythm, the ripples of Bernard and Ghost's story reaching farther than they could ever have imagined. Laws changed on every continent. Statues of unknown soldiers now included war dogs at their side. Military working dogs received not only medals, but lifelong care. Families found healing where there had only been silence. Bernard, Emily, Sully, Riley, Brooks and O'Hara became advocates and educators. They traveled to bases and schools, spoke at memorials, helped train new volunteers. They worked with Interpol, launching an international initiative to find and reunite lost or abandoned canine veterans from every conflict, from Afghanistan to the streets of Kiev, from the deserts of Africa to the jungles of South America. Ghost and Valor adapted to quieter lives. They found comfort in routines, slow walks through sunlit meadows, long naps on Bernard's porch, play in the autumn leaves with children who visited the Wexler home. They were visited by dignitaries, photographed for news stories. But Bernard always drew a line. Let them be dogs first, heroes second. Thomas's grave received visitors from around the world. Each letter, each stone, each tiny medal left at his marker was a testament to a legacy no one could erase. Bernard would sit in the grass, Ghost and Valor at his side, reading old letters aloud, telling new children about the courage it takes to love without question and to come home no matter how hard the journey. The wounds didn't vanish overnight. There were still nights when Bernard woke from nightmares, or when Emily cried softly reading a letter from a handler in Brazil or Ukraine who still hadn't found their partner. But now, hope always followed. There was a network, a voice, a family bound not by blood but by truth. One evening, Bernard hosted a reunion at the old fishing dock, the Helena bobbing gently in the bay. Friends and strangers alike gathered, handlers, rescued dogs, families of the fallen. A quiet toast was raised to those who had made it home and those who never would. Emily looked out at the crowd, her heart full. "Dad," she said quietly, "did you ever think a single act of kindness, a fisherman rescuing a dog at sea, could change so much?" Bernard smiled, the lines on his face deeper but softer now. "I think every story starts with a rescue, Em. Sometimes it's the dog. Sometimes it's the person. Sometimes it's the whole world," Ghost barked softly, as if in agreement. Valor trotted over to nuzzle Bernard's hand, then ran to join a group of children tossing sticks in the surf. As the sun set, the world felt, if not healed, then at least moving toward healing. Bernard gazed at the horizon, the salty air filling his lungs. Ghost and Valor pressed close. He spoke, voice full and steady. "We are all searching for home, for a place to belong, for someone to remember us, for a truth that won't be forgotten. Today, thanks to these dogs, and to all of you, we've brought a little more light into the world." And as dusk settled and laughter echoed down the dock, Bernard knew that the ghosts had finally found their rest, not in silence, but in the stories that would live forever. If this story moved you, help us keep these memories alive. Share this video to honor the real heroes, both human and animal, who serve you, save and love without asking for anything in return. Subscribe for more powerful stories about loyalty, courage, and hope. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering, and thank you on behalf of every forgotten friend for being part of the rescue.